Hi everyone, this is my reading and annotations and analysis for chapter 39 of the Handmaid's Tale. In this chapter we have the commander and Offred going into a room in the hotel. So we have a distortion by the commander of the ceremony as he seeks to engage Offred in a kind of traditional heterosexual sexual relationship. And we have some really interesting moments in this that are connected both with Moira and Offred's mother that we'll discuss as we get to them. So, the commander has a room key. He got it from the front desk while I waited on the flowered sofa. He shows it to me slyly. I am to understand. So again, we have the commander who controls the space that Offred exists in, not just her body or her life and her lifestyle. And we've had that before with his controlling of the space in his office in the house, and here now we have this kind of locked room that he takes her into, which creates a sense of the kind of gothic space that he's inviting her to. This room, which as we'll see is a room that's got some significance, becomes a place of kind of horror where Offred has to kind of sacrifice herself on this altar. And so as he smiles slyly and Offred is to understand, what she's to understand here is the expectation that he and she will engage in sex, and that to a certain extent her role is unchanged. Her body, her physical big body, becomes a vessel from which the commander takes pleasure. We ascend in the glass half egg of the elevator, past the vine-draped balconies, and of course again we have all of this imagery that's connected with fertility. I am to understand also that I am on display, and of course the constant reminder that in this place she doesn't have the role of a handmaid, which is to recede in the background and to function only as a womb on two legs. In this place she has the role of being a trophy, a prize that the commander is showing off, and part of that is not only showing off her physical body to her admirers, but also showing off his power over her physical body, that he can take her as he wishes. He unlocks the door of the room. Everything is the same, the very same as it was once upon a time. And of course we know that this hotel is one that Offred and Luke visited in the time when Luke was still married to his first wife, before they then got married and had their own daughter. And it's not without some irony that the commander brings her into this room. It's tragic here because this room then is a room that had been a room of happy memories in her relationship with Nick, and those memories are distorted and twisted into something more sinister and unpleasant as she enters this room with the commander. The drapes are the same, the heavy flowered ones that match the bedspread, orange poppies of royal blue, the thin white ones to draw against the sun, the bureau and bedside tables, square cornered, impersonal, the lamps, the pictures on the walls, the fruit in the bowl, stylized apples, flowers in a vase, buttercups and devil's paintbrushes, which is another type of flower, keyed into the drapes. All is the same. And we have that same scientific detached description of this bedroom, of this room in the hotel, that's similar to the manner in which Offred describes her own room in the commander's house. And again here, although we have this layered imagery, again fertility imagery to do with floral nature, which often is connected with the handmaids, here we have the contrast. We know that everything that takes place in this room is going to be in stark contrast to the things that happened here with Luke. And of course that then is layered into the description, where perhaps before it had been amusing or ordinary, now it becomes tawdry and sinister. I tell the commander, just a minute, and go into the bathroom. My ears are ringing from the smoke, and the gin has filled me with lassitude, which is partly lethargy and also acceptance. I wet a washcloth and press it to my forehead. After a while, I look and see if there are any little bars of soap in individual wrappers. There are, the kind with the gypsy on the front from Spain. And again, we get this sense of the foreign and the exotic, that this room is such a world away from Offred's existence now as a handmaid. I breathe in the soap smell, the disinfectant smell, and stand in the white bathroom listening to the distant sounds of water running, toilets being flushed. In a strange way, I feel comforted, at home. There's something reassuring about the toilets. Bodily functions, at least, remain democratic. Everybody shits, as Moira would say. And again, we get that sense, that soap, that disinfectant smell, that sense here that this is, there's something about this moment that Offred wants to wash clean, and she can't quite reach that. But also, she, like Moira, often reacts with humour to the situation that she's in. And so we just have the kind of the ordinary, almost banal nature that life goes on, even in this hotel. I sit on the edge of the bathtub, gazing at the blank towels. Once they would have excited me. They would have meant the aftermath of love. And we have this kind of realisation of the enormity of the change in which she's in this room. I saw your mother, said Moira. And it's just worth reflecting before we read on and listen to what Moira tells Offred about her mother. And this is another part of the conversation that they had when they were in the bathroom together. That it is significant that in this moment, as Offred is in a position where she has to engage in intercourse with the commander, she's got no choice. It is significant to note that both Moira and her mother, strong feminists, that their stories come to a conclusion, come to an end. Offred's already told us that she never saw Moira again, and we draw Offred's mother's story to a close in this section as well. And so we have a door being closed on these strong feminists, these women who to a certain extent were voices and memories that gave Offred strength. So I saw your mother, Moira said. Where? I said. I felt jolted, thrown off. I realised I'd been thinking of her as dead. And of course that's what Gilead does to you. It makes you spend your time thinking of those that from your life before as dead. Not in person, this is Moira. It was in that film they showed us about the colonies. And you'll remember that Moira describes the choice that she's given once she's captured, having escaped the Red Centre, and she's given the choice of Jezebel's or becoming an unwoman. Well, she's an unwoman in Jezebel's as well, but being sent to the colonies, and the colonies clean up the radioactive waste from whatever the environmental disaster is that's taken place. And she described the kind of gruesome ending that people who are sent to the colonies come to. There was a close-up. It was her all right. She was wrapped up in one of those grey things. But I know it was her. Thank God, I said. Why thank God, said Moira. I thought she was dead. She might as well be, said Moira. You should wish it for her. And of course, the indication there is that no one lasts long in the colonies, and that death is preferable to the experience of the kind of the long drawn out painful deaths that would be had by someone in the colonies dying of radiation sickness without any medical care. And so death is preferable, and to a certain extent there are some links there with Frankenstein. I can't remember the last time I saw her. It blends in with all the others. It was some trivial occasion. She must have dropped by. She did that. She breezed in and out of my house as if I were the mother and she were the child. She still had that jauntiness. Sometimes, when she was between apartments, just moving into one or just moving out, she'd use my washer-dryer for her laundry. Maybe she'd just come over to borrow something from me, a pot, a hairdryer. That too was a habit of hers. And we have here this kind of this sense of the meaningless interactions that happen within families, and the casual nature of those relationships, and then how Offred has realised how precious those moments are. And then we have this acceptance that Offred has of her mother and the unconventional nature and life that her mother had and lived. I didn't know it would be the last time, or else I would have remembered it better. I can't even remember what we said, and we have that regret. A week later, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, when things had become suddenly so much worse, I tried to call her, but there was no answer, and no answer when I tried again. And again, we have this rapid escalation of activities in Gilead. A week later, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, when things had become so much worse. She hadn't told me she was going anywhere, but then maybe she wouldn't have. She didn't always. She had her own car and wasn't too old to drive. Finally, I got the apartment superintendent on the phone. He said he hadn't seen her lately. I was worried. I thought maybe she'd had a heart attack or a stroke. It wasn't out of the question, though she hadn't been sick that I knew of. She was always so healthy. She worked at Nautilus and went swimming every 2 weeks. I used to tell my friend she was healthier than I was, and maybe it was true. Nautilus is a company that makes exercise machinery, so we assume that she worked at a gym. And we have that sense here of the kind of the immortal nature of one's parents, and Offred realising here the sense of mortality surrounding a parent, but also the hints of Gilead. Luke and I drove across the city, and Luke bullied the superintendent into opening up the apartment. She could be dead on the floor, Luke said. The longer you leave it, the worse it will be. You thought of the smell. And of course, she needs Luke to do these things for her now because she doesn't have the freedom to do them herself. The superintendent said something about needing a permit. But Luke could be persuasive. He made it clear we weren't going to wait or to go away. I started to cry. Maybe that's what finally did it, and we have this kind of acute focus on the gender roles here. She needs Luke in order to discuss this and to persuade the superintendent. He has authority now where she doesn't. She's no longer employed, she's no longer got money, all of these rapid changes. But what she does have is the ability to play to her gender role, to cry and play on his emotions. When the man got the door open, what we found was chaos. There was furniture overturned, the mattress was ripped open, bureau drawers upside down on the floor, their contents strewn and mounded. But my mother wasn't there. "I'm going to call the police," I said. I'd stopped crying. I felt cold from head to foot. My teeth were chattering. "Don't," said Luke. "Why not?" I said. I was glaring at him. I was angry now. He stood there in the wreck of the living room, just looking at me. He put his hands into his pockets, one of those aimless gestures people make when they don't know what else to do. "Just don't," is what he said. And of course, we have this indication that she's been taken by the secret police, the eyes, and that to report her missing would then put them in danger. And so he has this kind of helplessness and hopelessness, and this unspoken need to communicate that to Offred without kind of alerting her to the fact that they will also be in danger. Your mother's neat, Moira would say when we were at college. Later, she's got pizzazz. Later still, she's cute. She's not cute, I would say. She's my mother. Gee, said Moira, you ought to see mine. I think of my mother sweeping up deadly toxins, the way they used to use up old women in Russia sweeping dirt. Only this dirt will kill her. I can't quite believe it. Surely her cockiness, her optimism, her energy, her pizzazz will get her out of this. She'll think of something. But I know this isn't true. This is just passing the buck, as children do to mothers. I've mourned for her already, but I will do it again and again. And so here, like Moira, these two symbols of kind of female strengths are now both broken by Gilead's. Not dead necessarily, but broken in terms of having been destroyed. And so the strength that she had given Offred in her memory, the same strength that Moira had given Offred in her memory, is now removed, and Offred is left a little bit like her mother's apartment, completely wrecked. And so she says, I've mourned her, but I'll mourn her again and again. And it's this kind of cycle of grief that Gilead creates. I bring myself back to here, to the hotel. This is where I need to be now. In this ample mirror under the white lights, I take a look at myself. And of course, it's important for Offred to make sure that she doesn't forget the present. The present that she's in is a particularly dangerous present. And then, having seen how Gilead has broken Moira and her mother, Offred stands and looks at herself and asks herself, you know, who is she in this place? How can she cope? It's a good look, slow and level. I am a wreck. And that's the same word that was used to describe her mother's room. The mascara has smudged again, despite Moira's repairs. The purple lipstick has bled, hair trails aimlessly. The molting pink feathers are tawdry as carnival dolls, and some of the starry sequins have come off. Probably they were off to begin with. And I didn't notice. I'm a travesty, a disaster, in bad makeup, someone else's clothes, used glitz. I wish I had toothpaste. I could stand here and think about it, but time is passing. I must be back at the house before midnight, otherwise I'll turn into a pumpkin. Or was that the coach? And we have these, again, these references to fairy tales and the horror of the original fairy tale stories, not the Disney ones. Tomorrow's the ceremony, according to the calendar. So tonight, Serena Joy wants me serviced. And if I'm not there, she'll find out why. And then what? And we have this revelation of the complex web of lies that Offred has got herself involved in. So tonight is the night where she will have this encounter, not only with the commander in this hotel room, but also with Nick. And the commander, for a change, is waiting. I can hear him pacing in the room. Now, you might normally associate pacing with nervousness or anxiety, but we suspect here this is his irritation. Now he pauses outside the bathroom door, clears his throat, a stagey ahem. I turn on the hot water tap to signify readiness and something approaching it. I should get this over with. I wash my hands. I must beware of inertia, which is to be static, to be passive. When I come out, he's lying on the king-size bed with, I note, his shoes off. And we have this kind of farcical, ridiculous description. It's almost ordinary. I lie down beside him. I don't have to be told. I would rather not, but it's good to lie down. I am so tired. Alone at last, I think. And that's the sort of kind of cheesy line that a guy might say. The fact is, I don't want to be alone with him, not on a bed. I'd rather have Serena Joy there too. I'd rather play Scrabble. And this is where we get this distortion of the ceremony. She'd rather have the ceremony take place as is expected in Gilead than to be involved in this sexual encounter in which she still has no choice in participating in, but this time she has to fake her engagement and her enjoyment. But my silence does not deter him. Tomorrow, isn't it? And he's referencing the ceremony. He says softly, I thought we could jump the gun. He turns towards me. Why did you bring me here? I say coldly. He's stroking my body now, from the stem to as they say, to the stern, cat stroke, along the left flank and down the left leg. He stops at the foot, his fingers encircling the ankle, briefly, like a bracelet, where the tattoo is. A braille he can read, a cattle brand. It means ownership. Again, we have this animal imagery that's often used with reference to the female body, the handmaid's bodies in particular. And the reminder here that the handmaids all have tattoos so that they can't try and escape. They can't kind of deny. And then this sense, this ownership that he owns her body, just as Gilead owns her body and is free to use it as he so desires. I remind myself that he's not an unkind man, that under other circumstances, I even like him, as in when they're playing Scrabble. His hand pauses. I thought you might enjoy it, for a change. He knows this isn't enough. I guess it was sort of experiment. That isn't enough either. You said you wanted to know. He sits up, begins to unbutton. Will this be worse? To have him denuded, all of his cloth power? He's down to the shirt, and then under it, sadly, a little belly, wisps of hair. And we have this kind of this revelation of him declothed, which repels her. He pulls down one of my straps, slides his other hand in among the feathers, but it's no good. I lie there like a dead bird. And we have that play on words. The word bird is often used to describe females. He's not a monster, I think. I can't afford pride or aversion. There are all kinds of things to have to be discarded under the circumstances. And so we have this sense that she can't afford the reactions that her body wants to have, her mind wants to have. She can't afford to be prideful. She can't afford to be rebellious. She can't afford to show her aversion, her distaste. And so she makes the sacrifice again, just as she does when she's in the ceremony. This is the ceremony. It's a distortion of the ceremony. It's still a power play by the commander. Maybe I should turn the lights out, said the commander, dismayed and no doubt disappointed. He's looking for a passionate encounter. He's looking for something that's as close to having a mistress as a married man can. And that's what he's been hoping for, and he's disappointed by her behaviour. I see him for a moment before he does this. Without his uniform, he looks smaller, older, like something being dried. The trouble is, I can't be with him any different from the way I am usually with him. Usually I'm inert. Surely there must be something here for us, other than this futility and bathos. Bathos is a kind of a ridiculous anticlimax, or an anticlimax that's very disappointing. And so Offred here has to fight not only her indoctrination, and this is where Gilead is very interesting, because obviously she is required by the ceremony to take no pleasure in the ceremony. The ceremony itself is set up physically so that she experiences no pleasure. And of course, she's indoctrinated into thinking that this is, just about procreation. But also, so in the circumstances, she should react with more positivity to what's happening here. But of course, she reacts just as the reader desires her to react. She is repulsed and experiences aversion to this moment. But of course, that's dangerous. And so we have her stuck in a situation where she now has to play another role. Fake it. I scream at myself inside my head. You must remember how, little kind of feminist sub-comment there about women faking orgasms. Let's get this over with, or you'll be here all night. Bestir yourself, move your flesh around, breathe audibly. It's the least you can do. And so she has to pretend to enjoy it, and that makes it worse. And it makes it worse considering what we know she's about to get involved with Nick. It makes it worse considering that we know that this is a room where her and Luke used to meet. And it makes it worse considering we also know that this is what the commander did with the previous handmaid. And she obviously ended up killing herself. And it's interesting here because this then is all about the commander and his power, and very little about the woman at all. And so despite all of the transformations that Offred has been in from handmaid to kind of slutty whore, her role is unchanged. She's there to satisfy and please a man in the patriarchy. And of course, we've talked about this before, but there is this idea in radical feminism that all heterosexual sex is a power trip, and when it takes part within a patriarchy where women are oppressed, it is particularly a form of masculine dominance. And Atwood seems to kind of see that in this moment. And that's it for this chapter.